It is easy to overlook certain elements of a biblical narrative that seem circumstantial, secondary, or unimportant. This is certainly true of today's passage in our examination of the week leading to Jesus' death and resurrection. After the so-called triumphal entrance, Jesus spent the night in Bethany, returning to Jerusalem early the next day. It seems that Jesus skipped breakfast as he left Bethany because Mark tells us that he was hungry. This brief comment reveals much about Jesus' nature. It reminds us that Jesus was fully human. Hunger is a fundamental human experience. Hunger is used to illustrate a survival-level need. Although its intensity is partially lost once hunger is satisfied, a person who is truly hungry is dominated by that need. It's all the person can think about it. So, a hungry Jesus sees from a distance something surprising: a fig tree in leaf. Mark informs us that it was not the season for figs, and therefore it would be unusual to find mature fruit in a fig tree. However, this tree draws Jesus' attention because it already has a full covering of leaves, an indicative of an early bloomer. Its foliage signals that it should have early figs. With that expectation, Jesus approaches the tree, but is immediately disappointed. The tree had leaves, but no fruit. As someone has said, it was all expectation, but no satisfaction. We can assume that Jesus' hunger was intense. His shocking response to the lack of fruit in the tree indicates that to be the case. In Mark 11:14, we read, "Then he said to the tree, 'May no one ever eat fruit from you again.' And his disciples heard him saying it." Mark and Matthew offer a slightly different account on the moment it happened, but they both agree on the plight of the tree. The tree withered from the roots, never to yield fruit again. R.C. Sproul reminds us that this is the only instance in Jesus' ministry that he performed a miracle of destruction. This event has confused believers, vexed Bible scholars, and energized the critics of Christianity. Bertrand Russell, who wrote a book entitled "Why I Am Not a Christian," points to this narrative as one of his reasons for rejecting Christ, saying this: "I cannot myself feel that either in matter of wisdom or in matter of virtue, Christ stands quite as high as some other people known to history. I think I should put Buddha and Socrates above him in those respects." This action is out of character for Jesus as he is portrayed in the Gospels. We are more comfortable with the Jesus who lovingly welcomes children, compassionately heals the sick, or decisively calms the storms. However, Jesus is also the tree cursing and the temple cleansing Jesus. Yes, in the span of hours, we are confronted with Jesus' most extreme actions recorded in the Gospels. It is not my goal here to address the possible objection to these events, but to share a few practical lessons or applications that we can learn from Jesus' actions. Let's first look at the cursing of the fig tree. Two concepts come to my mind when I think of a tree that showed outward signs of fruitfulness, but when closely scrutinized, proved to be barren. First, the fig tree is an objective lesson on hypocrisy. Second, the fig tree is also a lesson on the lack of fruitfulness and its consequences. The Gospels reveal how Jesus repeatedly denounced the sin of hypocrisy. He was especially harsh in denouncing the hypocrisy of the Jewish religious leaders of his time. In Matthew 23, he proclaims 8 woes against the teachers of the law and the Pharisees. And in almost all of them, Jesus called them hypocrites. No wonder the Apostle Paul warns believers in 2 Timothy 3:5 to avoid those who show an outward appearance of godliness, but in fact deny God's power. The barren tree also illustrates the lack of fruitfulness, another theme present in Jesus' teaching. A tree that produces no fruit betrays the reason of its existence. In his passionate prayer for the Colossian church, the apostle prays that they may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God. Colossians chapter 1, verse 10. The second major event of that day was Jesus cleaning, or better yet, clearing the temple of those who shouldn't be there or who are there with a wrong motive. Matthew 21:12 and 13 provide the details of this event. Matthew 21:12 and 13, and Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it in a den of robbers." The late pastor and theologian R.C. Sproul captures the essence of Jesus' actions in the Jerusalem temple that day. He says our Redeemer's cleansing of the temple at the very least illustrates how concerned he is with the purity of worship. Our corporate praise and prayer is something that is always in need of reformation. For it is easy for anti-Christian practice to slip in unnoticed. Consider the importance of pure worship from a devout heart and make it your aim to show reverence and awe when we praise the Lord alongside his people. How contemporary is this challenge? We see so much today in the church that completely misses the point of why we Christians, we believers, gather together. That's why I love what the Apostle Paul tells us in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 16, because this verse really gives a perfect sense of what Christians should do when we gather together for corporate worship. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts.